Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lisa with Lisa Capen Quilts, and today I thought I would bring you along in my journey of learning different embroidery stitches, and I thought I would show you two of my favorite as of today, the lattice stitch and the chain stitch. So just showing you here on the screen, this is a mug rug that I'm going to be demonstrating for the live mug rug of the month. This will be a free pattern, y'all, called Summer Days. So set your reminders for Tuesday, the 17th, May 17th at 8:30 p.m. So the lattice stitch and the chain stitch. The lattice stitch makes a wonderful filler stitch that looks so much more complicated than it is. I had to watch tutorials on how to do it, and there's so many variations of this stitch. Today we're going to just keep it simple and just show you a simple lattice stitch, and then the chain stitch, which you can do so many different kinds of lines and outlines of applique with the chain stitch, and that's how I'm using it today. Just going around a simple circle applique. So let's get started with the lattice stitch. To get started with the lattice stitch, you might find it helpful, like I do, to give yourself a little grid to help evenly space out the lines of your stitch. So I'm going to use just a friction fine line marker and draw myself a little grid, and I'm just eyeballing it, but you could use a ruler and evenly space out these lines. I have vertical lines and horizontal lines going right across my applique piece. So to get started with this stitch, you're going to come up from behind your work to the front and straight down across the line that you've drawn on the fabric. We're making long, big stitches, and they're just loose right now, so you can move them around with your finger, but we're just going from one side of the applique to the other and traveling behind the fabric to space out our stitches. So I like to do all of my vertical lines first and then come back and do the horizontal lines. And you'll see I'm just using my drawn grid and trying to stay on that grid as much as possible. From one side to the other until you have filled up your grid. Then you'll simply just tie off your work and you're ready to anchor down these stitches. And for this, I'm going to use a different color thread. We're going to come up from behind our work right under our first intersection where the lines cross over each other, right next to it, and we're going to cross over that intersection. So we're crossing over both threads, and I'm bringing the needle right back down in the same hole that I came up with the yellow thread, and pull it down tight and snug, and that locks down both the vertical and the horizontal threads. Now, when I come up from behind the fabric, I like to come up on the line that I drew the grid. And then jump over both stitches, and it's going to be hard to see because I'm right-handed. Jump over both stitches and bring that needle right back down in the same hole and snugly anchor both of those top threads right in place. I like to go in the same direction, so you'll notice I start on the bottom left and cross over and come over on the right. I don't know that it matters which direction you cross over, but I like to make sure that all of my little crossovers are going in the same direction. So I just travel right on the back side from one intersection to the next. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there are so many different variations to this stitch. You can fill in your grid with lazy daisies and all kinds of decorative hand stitches. Sometimes I even like to go back in the opposite direction after I've crossed over all these intersections, just forming a little X at these intersections. And today I'm using an 8-weight pearl cotton so that you can hopefully see my stitches pretty well. I'm also using a size 24 chenille needle. So just working my way up and down these little intersections, anchoring them all down. And what I kind of like about the anchoring stitch that I'm doing here is that if I wasn't exactly straight with my longer grid lines, I can kind of fudge them a little with this anchoring stitch just to kind of straighten them up just a little bit. So once you've anchored down the last intersection, you are done. And that is very, very simply put, the lattice stitch, which looks way more complicated than it is. And now we're going to outline this applique with a chain stitch. So to get started with our chain stitch, we're going to come up from behind our fabric and pull the needle all the way through. Now we're going to lower our needle right back down into the very same hole that we came up through, but not pulling the thread all the way through. We're going to leave ourselves a little working loop. We're going to travel over the distance of your stitch, however long you want to make your stitches. And we're going to come back up through the fabric and loop over our thread right over the needle and pull the thread all the way through. You can pull that snug against your work, and we're ready to take our next stitch. We're going to go back right down into the hole that we just came out of inside that loop, leaving a good working loop on the top of our fabric. We're going to travel over for our next stitch, loop over our thread across the needle, and pull all the way through, forming our second stitch. And we just repeat this. We're lowering the needle right back down into the same hole, looping over the thread, taking our next stitch, and working our way all the way around our applique piece. So this upper top loop never goes all the way back to the other side. You always have a little working loop on the front. Until you run out of thread on your needle or you're ready to stop your stitch. So I just wanted to show you here. Let's say your thread is getting a little short to work with. We've taken our last stitch. If you want to stop your work, bring your needle right above the last loop and lower it right down into the background of your work and pull snug, and that'll lock that last stitch. To continue, we're going to be working right in that last stitch right there. We're going to bring our needle up right at the top of our last stitch, right in the top of that loop. Bring our thread all the way to the top again. And then we just continue like we never broke stitches. We're going to lower it right back down into the same hole we just came out of. Leave yourself a working loop on the top. Space over for your next stitch. The needle goes through the loop and we pull it snug. Right back down into the same hole we came up through. Loop over the thread. And we just keep on repeating all the way through. We want to try to keep our stitches the same length all the way through. That was a little bit hard for me, and I think I'm getting better eyeballing the distance. And just like with anything, I think, the practice makes us better. And so my stitches have become a lot more consistent than when I first started. We're going to work all the way back to where we started. Remember to keep that working loop on the top of your fabric. And when we come back to close to where we started, we're going to take our last stitch. All right, so we're going to come up right in the hole where we originally first started of that very first stitch. We're going to loop over our thread, and when we go back down, we're going to go right down into that very first stitch that we started with. And that completes our chain stitch. Doesn't that make a great outline for applique? I love it. So there we go, our little lattice stitch and our chain stitch. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope you give this a try. Again, I am certainly not experienced with many years of hand stitch embroidery skills. I am just learning, but I am super excited to bring you along in my journey, and I'm hoping that this inspires you to give it a try if you've never tried this. And remember, stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed yet, you might want to. We're going to be doing this mug rug. It's going to be a free pattern coming up in May. So feel free to join me then. All right, everybody, have fun stitching, and I'll see y'all soon. Bye.